I think one of the main ways that we did that was we started with the essential question of the investigation and ended with the essential question of the investigation, and that was the exit ticket. So I feel like I was a little bit, like, I had, like, some doubt about ending with the exit ticket as, like, them saying something instead of them doing, like, instead of them, like, actually showing us that they understand that if you have 23 heads of lettuce amongst 10 boxes, I have to do 10 divided by 23, and that's because the numerator is divided by the denominator. But I feel like we got around it, did enough small checks for understanding where everyone was pretty clear on that process during the group work. And then when they were doing the exit ticket, I was like, yes, I feel like they're ready to do this because I feel like they got the skill during the independent practice time. So
yeah, it was a productive class, which allowed for that exit ticket. Some classes we kind of get towards the end and we look at each other and we're like, I don't know if they understood what steps you need to take to solve this problem. But I feel like we checked in a few times and they had all gone through the necessary steps to show that they understood that they needed to be dividing and creating decimals. And
yeah.
I think our purposeful groupings were huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
They saved us a lot of time, and we knew instinctively which groups could start out on their own and we could check in afterwards to push their thinking, and then we knew which groups would need our guidance at the beginning in organizing their information.
And we front-loaded them with the questions, so they knew it wasn't like at the end, surprise, answer this question, and then scramble to think of what it might be. It's like we
drawing connections throughout the lesson.
Right. And checking in with kids as we went, like, does it make sense to put it in decimal? Which one is easier?
Mm-hmm. It's hard. I co-teach 6 classes, and Kata and I have different levels of planning with each teacher. Kata and I tend to meet up on Sundays, and plan. It's really difficult. We meet once a week, but only for a half hour, and we teach 3 classes together.
Yeah, and we usually extend that past the half hour. Yeah, which is it's so hard to find time. So
as a special educator, planning is definitely my biggest challenge, just finding the time to meaningfully plan, especially when we spend a lot of our time together trying to figure out how to meaningfully assess work too.
Right.
So it's definitely something but we planned last night and we're able to really I feel like our planning made the lesson. I feel like overall the lesson went well, and I feel like our planning really contributed to that.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's other logistical things too, though, especially in a school with such a shared space. This classroom needs to be set up. The tables were not set up in this formation when we got here this morning, so it's moving all the tables and chairs. There's just 36 chairs and 6 tables. It's doable, but that's something to think about. And then having to have advisory right before class and come in and have to make sure that all the chairs are still move them back because an advisory meets in here, and it's little logistical things like that really do affect it as well, because students are wanting to come in, but if the room isn't set up, the organization the class starts a few minutes later and the projector wasn't working, which is no blame on anyone or
common
anything.
occurrence.
It's just a common it's just the things that happen. And and making copies, we both came to school with a 6-point long checklist of this is everything that needs to happen in the morning, and then you hit traffic and so it's just life gets in the way no matter how much you plan.
I definitely think it helps, and we have one-to-one paraprofessional that helps one individual student with needs, but being able to say to her confidently, here's the answer key, here's the accommodation for your table, even allows that table to function so much more smoothly because we're not trying to communicate with her at the same time. And so that's something just a little thing giving her an answer key or front loading hey, we're going to be doing this lesson next is an important part that doesn't always get done.
Right. And also us being on the same page. I unfortunately don't always include Meg in my last minute ideas of I wanted to do an exit ticket about this, but and then that's something I'm working on. That's my goal as a co-teacher. But we both sat down last night and we both knew how the lesson was going to play out from beginning to end. So we could check in with each other, and Meg knew we need 5 minutes at the end of class. We need 10 minutes to do the exit ticket. It's time. Like, remind me. And because she knew that ahead of time and I knew it ahead of time, we both could check in with each other saying, hey, it's time to...
The time on the slides has been an iteration that Kata's made in her planning that's made things easier for me, because it's very transparent to both us and the kids that, like, this is supposed to end at this time. And it's been super helpful for me because I can help keep her, and then she can help we can help focus each other. Or when we say, hey, they actually don't get this, let's do a quick, like, mini lesson on this. It allows us to be like, okay, we know that we're, like, off track, but this time is also being used productively. And we know that we then have to allocate 10 minutes to this tomorrow, so it's really helped me, especially on those days where, like, we haven't planned the whole lesson together, and I kind of run in from physical activity sweaty, and she's setting up, and I'm kind of like, okay, great, do now, it's 10 minutes, and okay, let's move on, so it definitely helps in a co-teaching environment.
So the routines, I think you saw a few of them. We saw the silent shaka, which is meant to give them time to finish their sentence or finish whatever they're writing, and then bring their attention to the front. We used Hey Seekers, which is an immediate attention grabbing, just to kind of give the whole class a reminder. We used clapping. The purposeful groupings, which we said was just a preemptive behavior management, because when the groupings aren't as cohesive and at the same ability level in a problem like this, oftentimes it is helpful to have different ability levels together, but there's the behavior management. It turns into frustration with people moving at different paces or not communicating the same way, and then out of that frustration stems behavior issues.
One thing that worked well today was we, like, specifically when they came in, we were like, you will not need your Chromebooks, put them to the side.
Right.
And that way we have, like, 2 repeat offenders who are, like, constantly like, let me just, on the side. And it's like that challenge of one-to-one tech, like, trusting that they're using their technology in a responsible way. But that was super easy because we had one student who, like in the middle of the lesson kind of crept over, and I was like, do you need your Chromebook right now? No. Okay, then why would you be getting it? I'm not sure. Okay, great. Let's reconsider that and sit back down at your table and work with your group. There was, like, an easy, like, there's an, I could obviously see him, and that was easier for me because instead of when he already had the Chromebook and had it open, I could catch the behavior beforehand and ask him to cease and desist.
One of the things that's challenging about managing behavior when you have all these small groups happening is that when we're doing whole group teaching, you catch things, like, right away, or ideally right away, more so. But in small groups, like, we're crouched at 2 different tables, but there's 4 other tables that have no one at them. So in this case, there was a table off camera who 2 students were having, I don't even know what happened, but they walked over. One was clearly upset. Someone had said something not kind to the other student, and that's something that I think we would have seen it before if it had been more whole group, but because we're so engrossed with working in the groups, it was something that had to be handled after the fact. But in that case, the student just needed some space and separate to the other end of the long table.
And it's also a student that, frequently needs reminders of expectations, right. And, their behavior plan has been calibrated to fit that, but, it's in that case, actually, I feel like the expectations definitely played a role because the other kids at the table knew, like, not to get involved. Like, nope. That's exactly instead, we're going to wait until a teacher comes and addresses this. And then I'm going to honestly say, this is what happened. And then, that other person, it could have escalated, but the other student, like, didn't respond, like, kind of ignored. And then we were able to deal with the other student's behavior separately afterwards.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that the norms we've set up at school and in this classroom that we've upheld throughout the year kind of lend itself to other students taking responsibility for their classmates when it's like, hey, get on track. Or when when we're waiting for 100% of, like, shakas and a student is just, like, sitting there not doing it, their classmates will take responsibility to be like, hey, we're waiting on you. So
yeah, and it's like what we talked about in the pre-interview. I think it's like the community expectations that we've set up allow for us not to be the bad guy. So I think it's like students took responsibility for their own behavior. I think like the biggest thing that we have is like students like off task or like kind of like not focusing. Just, you know, a couple of kids with ADHD who can't, and kids who are just middle schoolers, who just, their attention span is just not there. But, you know, making sure that our group instruction is only 10 minutes really helps with that. So, you know, then they're able to focus a lot more and be reminded by their classmates instead of by us. But, you know, we use a lot of nonverbal reminders, you know, where should your eyes be? Let's turn your chair, you know, things like that. Hopefully that we're seeing throughout the entire lesson, that helps them realize, you know, I don't have to be called out publicly for my behavior, but I'm getting the reminders that I need to follow expectations consistently.
I was excited. I was excited for every single group for how far they got. This is honestly one of the farthest I think the most focus I've seen out of the most amount of people in a while, just because there's inevitably always some students who are like, oh, I get it, I'm just going to like slide through, or I'm going to do the whole thing and then not really do it well. But these groupings really, I think, helped them to stay on task and do it purposefully and have really cool discussions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I was also happy with it. I thought they were pretty engaged during the entire thing, and it was a relevant concept, which allowed them to, you know, engage with it appropriately.
I mean, they talked about their experiences with food drives beforehand. Hopefully they made that, we didn't revisit that, but hopefully they made that connection a little bit. I didn't hear any of the discussions about, you know, but can we split up peanut butter into whatever
I
ounces?
didn't either, yeah.
But I think they were just, which is kind of a good thing, because that probably means they were focused on, or I'd like to think that it means that they were just wanted to figure out the math.
Yeah, I didn't hear them get to that point where they were kind of like, well, what if they only sell cheese in, you know, 8-ounce packages, and what's an ounce as compared to a kilogram, you know? So I didn't hear a lot of those discussions around measurement, but that's okay, because we heard a lot of the mathematical language occurring around parts of a whole, which is actually the objective of the lesson. So overall, they didn't impress me with their meta thinking, but I don't think this lesson was for that. And we still have, 5 months left in the school year to work on the meta thinking. So.
Use the water bottle. We forgot to.
Oh yeah, we spent so much time trying to figure out, like, okay, what's the best, like, how do we show them what a kilogram is?
Yeah, and we brought in 1.5, so a liter of water is a kilogram, weighs a kilogram. It depends on the temperature, but, you know, so we brought in a 1.5 liter bottle that was mostly filled, and because it was sitting on the back table and not on the projector cart, I just entirely forgot about it. It's something so little that it slipped my mind. But also, the fact that we didn't bring it up means the students, that wasn't necessarily a question that came up particularly. Yeah. And maybe it's just because they weren't thinking critically enough about what measurement they were using. But
there's definitely some overall gaps in understanding about measurement. But I don't know if this was because they were so engaged in the actual objective of the lesson, I don't know necessarily that it was, you know, too much of a big deal that they didn't question or need clarification around what a kilogram was. So.
We had also discussed telling the students that when there was a decimal that needed to be rounded, to round to the nearest thousandth, because 1,000 grams equals 1 kilogram, and that just makes the most logical sense. If you have part of a kilogram, you want to represent it in a gram so that you could say, you know, but
yeah, we often have so much that we'd love to front load and like so many little tidbits that we'd love to give, but it's the balance between you're going to lose half the class anyway if you're talking for 15 to 20 minutes, and the balance between like just let him go and let him figure those things out on their own and clarify when needed. Right,
and I'm glad that we had that pre-discussion though, because then when that corner table over there asked me, or was kind of having this like moment of we don't know what to do with this giant decimal, it was in my mind to say, oh, this is why we round. When if we hadn't co-planned so smoothly, I don't know if I would have had that answer ready to go.
Or if that answer had asked us, that answer may have been different.
Right.
But now we know that no matter who they asked, the answer would have been consistent, which is good for students. So.